Our portion here.
Okay, streaming, you can take a minute.
Great. Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Rabbi Mo. It is my privilege and pleasure to be learning our Parsha with you this morning, Parshat Noach, one of the most memorable in the whole Torah. And as usual, there's just so much. I was reading through the Parsha last night and this morning in preparation for this learning session, and I almost couldn't decide what to spend with you. Our time is so limited, and there's so much to dig into here. So unfortunately, we have to pick and choose. Um, but let's start with just an overview of where we are thus far in our Torah. We just started it a couple weeks ago, and where this parsha is going to take us. So we begin with Parshat Breshit, the creation of the world, the creation of the first human beings, and of course, very soon after the creation of the first human beings, they mess up and are kicked out of the garden. We have generations from Adam, 10 generations down to Noah. We're introduced to him at the end of the first Parsha. And here we go. He gets a Torah portion all to himself. We meet him and his three sons. We learn very shortly after that the whole earth, not just Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, but everything now has gone to waste, and people have become corrupt. The whole earth has become corrupt, God says, and he vows to wipe it out entirely, and to restart with one man, with Noah. We don't get much about Noah besides this one line that he was Ish Tzadik Tamim Haya B'Dorotav, and something like he was righteous and wholehearted in his generation. And of course, the rabbis argue about that. Does that mean that Noah was absolutely good at any time, or was it just because everybody was so evil of his time that he stood out as a decent person? We'll leave that to another session to debate. But we get the story of the ark. Noah is commanded to build an ark on which he will take all animals of all different kinds, two of each or seven of each maybe, as well as his own wife and sons and their wives onto the ark. There's a flood, a Mabul, that comes to the earth for 40 days and nights. They survive. They come out of the ark alive. There's the dove and the raven and the rainbow. Um, but then we get a story about Noah that's a little bit less, um, reflects a little bit less favorably on him. He becomes a drunkard. He's the originator of viticulture, but it gets the best of him. There's an incident with his sons that's not quite clear from the story as it's told in the Torah, but it seems like one of his sons um, abused him or disrespected him in some way. Um, and then that's really the last we see of Noah. We get generations more until Abraham, who we will meet next week in Parshat Lech Lecha. But for our time here, I was inspired by the sermon that Rabbi Wolpe gave on Shabbat last week. If you haven't had a chance to watch it or to listen to it, I really encourage you to. It's on our YouTube channel. The point that Rabbi Wolpe was making, as I understood it, is that what's most difficult, where the challenge presents itself most strongly, is not in the moment, we could say, is not in the moment of crisis even, but is after the crisis. He even gave a great line. I wanna read it to you. um, because it stood out to me. He says, this is Rabbi Wolkby speaking. Um, he's speaking of Abraham. So in the story of Abraham and the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, Abraham and Isaac go up a mountain, right? But Rabbi Wolpe says the hardest moment was coming down the mountain after that incident, after that trial and that trauma. It's afterwards, he says, after the peak moment, after the triumph, after the joy and after the jubilation and the parting and the wonder, all of the highs and the lows, it's after that that you have to watch out. That's when the real challenge comes. We see that in the case of Noah. Um, right? He bands together all of the animals of the earth and his own family. They survive the flood. They come out alive, but it's after. It's in the moments of joy, perhaps when he enjoys a little bit too much to drink. It's in the moment of calm and relaxation after the storm that this unfortunate incident with his sons happens. It's after the intensity that the real trial presents itself. Um, and I think that's very pertinent to our time today. We as a people have been through more than a trial in the last 2 years. And now, thank God, we've emerged from it in a way. We've emerged what's felt like uh, a day that's lasted more than 40 days and nights, that's lasted 730 days and nights. We've emerged from it. And here's where the challenge presents itself in this moment of joy mixed, of course, with grief and pain, but at least of a respite. It's at this moment that we have to be careful um, as we go forward. I was thinking of that also in a slightly different way as it presented itself in the Parsha as I read it. I want to throw this idea by you. I wish we had an exchange here over Zoom so I could get your input, but I'll at least offer it to you as something to think about on your own, which is this. The animals, we're told, come into the ark, right, in pairs, or in groups of seven. But we're told this as they come in. So I'm looking in our Chumash here, our Eitz Chaim Chumash. If you have this one, you can follow me, or you can find it in your own Chumash. I am going to chapter 8 of the book of Genesis, chapter 8, verse 19, I believe is what I want. Um, bear with me for 1 second while I find it here. Chapter 8, verse 19. Okay, yeah. So for me, it's on page 49, chapter 8, verse 19. So put a finger there because we're going to turn back a little bit. We're going to turn back a little bit when we're told about the animals as they come into the ark. Okay, so we're going to chapter 7. Bear with me. We're going to chapter 7. Um, okay, I found it. Chapter 7, verse 14. All right, so page 45 in the Eitz Chaim Humash, chapter 7, verse 14, where it says, I'll read it first in Hebrew and I'll translate. Hema, they, bechol chaya lemina, and every wild animal according to its kind, bechol habehema lemina, and every domesticated animal according to its kind, v'chol haremes haromes ala aretz, and every creepy crawly guy, leminehu, according to its kind, v'chol ha'of leminehu, v'chol hatzibor, kol, turning a page here, kol kanaf, okay, and every winged thing according to its kind, all of them came onto the ark with Noah. Okay, nothing particularly special here. But I want you to focus on the word lemina and leminehu, according to its kind or species. We've seen that word. We saw it many times in the book of Breshit as God created the animals, each according to its kind, lemina, leminehu. They come into the ark that way, according to their kind. And that's to be expected, right? In a very ordered way. But now let's go back to page 49, which again which is chapter 8, verse 19. This is after the flood, after the 40 days and nights of rain, after the water subsides on the earth and they emerge from the ark. How do they emerge? We're told in chapter 8, verse 19, Kol hachaya, okay, kol, every wild animal, kol haremes, every crawling creature, v'chol ha'of, kol romes al haaretz, every bird that flies or moves about the earth. How did they come out? Lemishpachotehem yatsu min hateva. Lemishpachotehem. Mishpacha, of course, means family. According to their families, yatsu min hateva. They came out of the ark. What struck me about that is it's the first time we get that word, mishpacha, family, in the Torah. Doesn't appear before that. And it's different from how they came in. They came in each according to their kind, to their species. They came out as a family. Now, you could read that as they came out by their species family, and that's how some of our commentators read it. I was looking in my Mikra Otes Gedolot, my book of Torah commentaries here, and I happened to see what some of our traditional commentators say about that word. They do comment on it because it's interesting. Lemishpachotehem, according to their families, Rashi says, Rashi, our chief commentator, he says, Kiblu alehem al manat lidabek biminan. They sort of accepted upon themselves to cleave or to cling to their own species. Okay, so Rashi interprets mishpacha as species, but I'm adamant in my own way to interpret it as family. Why? Why is it important to see it that way? Because I think it's very true to their own experience and to our own experience. They came onto the ark, each in their own tribe, so to speak. All of the animals according to their own tribe, but also even the humans. What's interesting here is we could find where it talks about Noah and his own family coming onto the ark. Ah, yes, if you want to look with me quickly, chapter 7, verse 7. It says, Noach uvanav ishto unashebanav ito. Noah and his sons came onto the ark. His wife and his sons' wives came onto the ark. In other words, they came on also separately to the ark, and some say they remained separate on the ark. But they came out as a family. In other words, my point, this whole ordeal, this trauma, this struggle brought them closer together and not further apart. Through that suffering, they bonded rather than separated. I think that's very real to our own experience as Jews over these past 2 years. We have experienced perhaps something far worse than even what Noah and humanity experienced. And yet, I hope you would agree that our own experience has been one of coming together and not splitting apart. If you recall, the day before October 7th, Israel was in a moment of a different crisis, an internal crisis, um, of extreme division, protests every week, out in the streets, about internal political issues. And yet, at the moment of October 7th, Israel and we, the people of Israel, came together and remained together all the way through. I've never felt so much a part of a people, of our people, as I have over the past 2 years, and I know that I'm not alone in that. I know that many who otherwise had no affiliation to their Judaism felt felt called to be part of this family. And I really think that's the word. That's what describes us as Jews. We are a family, and that's what we felt even more as over these past 2 years, especially perhaps, especially just the other week when those of our family who had been torn away from us, who we were praying to return to us in safety, came back, and we were whole as a family once again. It was a moment of such reuniting, of such beautiful familial unity. Um, and yet, going back to what Rabbi Wolpe spoke about, now comes the challenge. Will we remain as that close family now that the external trial is not pushing on us from the outside so strongly? Now that if you are a member of our community and you've been to our sanctuary on Shabbat morning, now that our poster of all of the hostages that we have looked at every week for the past 2 years, all of their faces, all of their names, now that that's not so present, will we still feel that familial closeness? Or will we let internal divisions separate us liminehu into our own factions, our own tribes? I hope not. I hope not. I hope we can take this as a lesson, if not from Noah himself, because I'm not sure that he and his own family learned that lesson, as we see in the story following their survival, their emergence from the ark. So soon after that, their own divisions between father and son, between sons, get the best of them, and they are rent apart just as soon. And we don't get that that sense of family, of that family bond and closeness until 10 generations later, Abraham comes, and God again, or perhaps for the first time, chooses not one individual, but a family. And it's as a family that we've remained for these past 2 millennia. And that, God willing, we will continue to remain and continue to strengthen that bond as a family. A last point, I want to leave you with. Noah emerges from the ark. He offers a sacrifice of thanksgiving to God, and God makes a covenant, a brit with Noah. It's the first time also that word appears in the Torah, that becomes so important to us as a people, our brit, our covenant with God. But God makes this covenant with all of humanity, and just like we have our own symbol, God puts a symbol in the clouds of this covenant, of course, the rainbow. That's the symbol of God's promise that never again will God bring such catastrophe to the world, that the world will continue to turn, and that we will continue to be the benefactors of God's kindness and compassion, so long as we treat each other with that same kindness and compassion. My question is, why does God need a reminder? Why does God need a symbol? God says, I will put my symbol, this rainbow, in the clouds, so that every time after it rains, I, God, will see the rainbow and I will be reminded of the covenant I made with you. I will be reminded of this promise. You'd think that God, if anyone, wouldn't need a reminder to keep his own promise. But maybe that's also a profound lesson that God too needs reminders, right? That after that peak moment of such uh, of such intensity, when we don't need a reminder. We certainly didn't need a reminder these past 2 years of everything happening to us. Even God, after that, needs a reminder. And so too, we need a reminder now that we don't have that poster, now that we maybe aren't wearing our pins or our dog tags uh, as regularly, as constantly as we were in the past. We still need to be reminded not only of the tragedy of the past 2 years, but also of the unity that it brought us, that we are a family. We need to remind ourselves of that. We're a family of people around the world, but we're also a family in our own community, right? Let us let us strive to live from that place of family and not species, not liminehu, but mishpacha. I I bless us that we all embrace our closeness as a family that has been wrought through struggle and trauma and tragedy, that we can hold on to that the day after, as Rabbi Wolpe has admonished us to, that we not fall when we come down the mountain, as it's so easy to fall on the way down as opposed to the way up. Let us strengthen each other and hold each other and embrace each other because really we need it. We need all the strength we can get. We need to remain strong because we're not through the challenge. As 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 much of a blessing as it is to be in this next chapter on this other side of that 2 years long day, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and we'll certainly be more successful in that work if we do it together as a family. I wish us all a Shabbat Shalom. May this give you some food for thought in your further studies. And I look forward to being with you back again, hopefully sooner than later, for another opportunity to learn together. Thank you all so much. Shabbat Shalom.